Hi, it's Penny here, and today we're going to be putting together my TBR for April. Like last time, I'm going to do this by looking through the 5 reading goals that I set for the year, and I think the one I'm the most invested in is TBR 0. I want to try and have no physical books on my shelves that I haven't read. I have a TBR cart here that I'm working my way through, and I think I can do it. I didn't do so great in March. Oh, there's still a few more days, so we'll see, but April will hopefully be better. So the way that I do it is I made this TBR Machine website that spits out random reading prompts, and I use that to pick 3 books off my TBR cart each month. So with that, let's pick the first prompt. Also, shout out to Melissa who let me know that my website was broken the other day so that I didn't have to be rushing to fix it now. I got to fix it just the other day. So prompt number 1 is read a book with a beautiful cover. I know what one I want to read. This one. Look at it. Oh, it's so shiny and pretty. So this is The Liminal Space by Jackie McRae, and she is a New Zealand author, a Maori author. I don't really know much about this, but it's kind of like 3 strange people, 4 people, who all live in this small village, get involved with this man who comes back to the village. They're not really sure if he is who he says he is, and he talks to trees. I've heard it's very magical and maybe even a little bit magical realism-ish. I don't really know, but I'm excited to read it, and honestly, it's super beautiful. Okay, then let's pick the next prompt. Read a book released 10 or more years ago. There's a lot of those on my TBR cart because a lot of the books on my TBR cart are books I got from secondhand shops, and some of them I still got a really long time ago. So that's hard. I like the TBR Machine because it limits my choices, and the more open my choices are, the harder it is. Why is the text so tiny in these old books? Okay, I'm actually going to go for another Maori authored book. I'm going to go for Cousins by Patricia Grace. This is a new movie tie-in edition that I thought was quite pretty. They've just released a movie based on this book, and I did think it looked really interesting. It's about these 3 cousins, and when they're young they get separated, but their friendship kind of lasts into their adulthood even though they're separated, and I think they go on very different journeys. I think one gets adopted by a white family and quite separated from her culture. Anyway, I would like to watch that movie, but I'd like to read the book first, so getting it on my April TBR would help with watching the movie soon. Okay, and then we'll pick our last prompt. Read a book with mental illness representation. I have very few books left on my TBR cart, and I'm not sure. It's often a hard one to find out about until you read the book, because unless it's like a significant part of the plot, it doesn't always get mentioned. Let me see what I can find. Okay, I found one. So I've got Someone Like Me by M.R. Carey. The Goodreads synopsis starts with saying that it's a story about violence and mental illness. The synopsis sounds like it's this woman with a violent husband, and then some darker side comes out of her. It sounds like maybe it's multiple personality disorder, but that makes me a little bit hesitant about whether it will be good representation or not, because it's often not represented well in like thrillery stories. However, I picked this up purely because it's M.R. Carey who wrote The Girl with All the Gifts, which I thought was really good, and the sequel to that, The Boy on the Bridge, had an autistic character which I thought was represented really well from what I know. I'm not autistic, but I believe the autism representation in that is good, and so that gives me hope that it will be good in this as well. This is quite big, so I'm a bit scared about adding it on. So I'm glad these other 2 books that I've selected are pretty short, although both of them have fairly small text. Anyway, that will be the 3 books that I'm picking off my TBR. Then my next goal for 2021 is to complete all the series I have in progress, like series 0. This is a much less achievable goal, but we're trying anyway. And I've said that every month I'm going to finish at least 1 series. I did pretty good in March. Did I? Yes, I finished at least 1. So in April, I'm going to try and finish a lot of the graphic series that I have. So I have volume 6 and 7 of The Wicked and the Divine. I also have a hold on 8. I think there's 9 volumes, but 8 has quite a long hold queue, so it might not come through in time for me to complete it, but at least I'm making progress on that series. I also have requested from the library the next 3 volumes of The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe, so that's 7, 8, and 9. I think my library has more of them, so I'll probably request them throughout the month. I didn't want to like overwhelm my library with putting a hold on 7 of the books from the series in one go. So I'll do the first 3 and then I'll finish that series off. It's a beautiful series about this young girl who's being looked after by this scary demon guy. Basically, there is this curse and people are cursed and they become demon-like, and they're called the Outsiders, and the Insiders are locked away, and they have all these soldiers keeping themselves separated from this curse, because if you touch someone who's cursed, then you catch the curse. Each volume is super short, so I've been trying to read them in groups. I found 3 is actually kind of a good amount of the story to get through in one go. Then I also plan to get from the library volumes 4 to 13 of Giant Days. This is just a really fun series about these girls at university. For some reason I really love it, even though it's not really the kind of thing that I would expect to like, but the colors are really bright, the characters are really fun, and I'm somehow invested in their relationships and their experiences at university. I think maybe also I'm just nostalgic for that university experience. So I really like this series. I'm going to be reading quite a lot of volumes, which is kind of messing with my stats, as you'll see in the next goal. But regardless, I think it'll be a really fun time working through this series. Also continuing with the graphics, I did get from the library the second volume of Erased. It's been a little while since I read the first volume, but we have this boy, and every now and then he will get to a point where things will just start repeating, and he'll know that within that repeating cycle that he's stuck in, there's something that he'll be able to notice that's going wrong, and when he fixes it, then time will continue again. So it's a really cool concept. The end of the first volume, he ended up being sent back quite far in time, and so we're trying to work out what is it that he needs to change. And there's definitely some weird mystery of things that went on when he was younger. So really looking forward to reading that as well. Then I have a couple of audiobooks that are continuations of series. So I've got Before the Coffee Gets Cold 2. Is that what it's called? Anyway, it's the sequel to Before the Coffee Gets Cold. The first book was just 4 short stories, I think, all based around this cafe where there's this particular seat, and if you sit there while you're drinking your coffee and before it gets cold, you can travel back in time to another time when you were in the cafe. It's very specific time travel, and I was really impressed with the first book, how it managed to write these really interesting stories around that concept, but also the stories were really emotional. So I guess I'm looking forward to crying over that. And then finally, I want to continue the Realm of the Elderlings. So I'm going to start the Rainwild Chronicles. I've been reading the Realm of the Elderlings for a while. I've read the first 3 trilogies, and then the Rainwild Chronicles is the first quartet. I believe it's set in the Rainwilds, where in the earlier books they kind of got involved with dragons and these elderlings that used to live in the area where they live in this way where the river is toxic, and so the people of the Rainwilds are kind of deformed. But the other side of that is that they have certain abilities, and through interacting with these artifacts of the elderlings that they've found, they have a whole bunch of magical artifacts to work with as well. Anyway, I've loved all the other books in the bigger series, so I'm excited to start a new part of that story, and it's quite possible that I might read more than one book in that series this month. It's my birthday month, so I should just get to read things that I like. Anyway, that's a bunch of series that I'm continuing, and I should finish off at least a couple of those. Then my third goal was to get more diversity in my reading. Now, I had 3 parts to that strategy. The first part is to read at least one Maori authored book every 2 months. Thanks to putting both of these on my April TBR, I will be 1 book ahead, which is quite exciting. As well, I wanted to read less than 70% white authors. Let me check my spreadsheet and see how I'm doing. Okay, so I'm on exactly 70% white authors for April. That's not doing too bad. And then my last strategy was that I wanted to read at least one non-binary authored book during the year, lowest bar ever, and luckily I've already surpassed that. In March I read 2, and as well I have this book from the library for April. So this is called Amatka. I don't know about the pronunciation of that, but it kind of seems like a dystopian romance, which you might think, Penny, you don't like romance, why are you picking this up? However, when I read further through the synopsis, it said something about the fact that they live in a world where language shapes the world around them, so things have to be continually named in order to keep existing. I don't know, that sounds like an amazing concept, so I want to read it for that reason. And I think the author is from Sweden. Anyway, I'll read that. And what I do notice from my graph is that I seem to be doing very badly at picking up women authors at the moment. Like usually that is well over 50%. But I think it's because in March I spent so much time reading comics, which were either authored by men or a mix of men and women, and so that's kind of taken away from my women authors. I do feel confident that in May I'll pull that back to more what's normal for me. So I think we're okay. But what I would say is, if you know of any graphic novels or comics that are written and illustrated entirely by women, I would love those recommendations down below. I think of all my favorites, the only one I really have that fits that criteria is Monstrous, but there's got to be some others that are out there that are really good, right? Then my fourth goal was around the genres that I'm reading, so I wanted to read less fantasy. Now, in April, I'm definitely reading less fantasy, and overall I'm now up to under 50% fantasy, which I think is less fantasy than I would have liked, so I'm overachieving with this goal and I think I need to pull it back. But again, that's because I'm reading Giant Days, and also these are both contemporaries, which is why that contemporary section is so big. We got to get that back down after this because that is not my genre. And really I wanted to read less fantasy so that I could read more science fiction and more horrors and thrillers, but I don't really want to add anything on to my TBR at this point. I think it's enough. So I guess I'll have to catch up on horrors and thrillers in the following months. If you know any that you think I would really love, me specifically, if you know my reading taste, then again I would love some recommendations down in the comments. And then my last goal was to get my average rating up, so that meant it needed to be at least above a 3.24. Currently it's at 3.41, so we're looking pretty okay. I think there should be enough books on this TBR that I'm expecting to really love that we can keep that average rating as high as it is. I don't think there's anything on that TBR that I think I'm definitely going to be rating lower than 3.5, so fingers crossed. That will mean we pull it up a little bit and maybe even reach our stretch goal of being over 3.5. So this is going to be my main TBR, as well as imagine on top of this a bunch of Giant Days graphic novels and a bunch of The Girl from the Other Side graphic novels. I'll probably read The Wicked and the Divine electronically, digitally, but you could imagine those stacked on here as well. Still, graphic things are quicker to read, so that shouldn't be too bad. I say this every month, and in March I'm not doing that great. There's only a few more days left of March and I haven't finished any of the books that I chose off my TBR yet. But I am partially through some of them, so fingers crossed we can finish that off. Do let me know if you have read any of these books or any of the books that I'm going to be reading in April, whether you think I'm going to like them. And then you can check back in at the end of the month for my wrap up and we can discuss them. Or let me know if you're interested in reading any of these. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.